Simplify My Small Business, episode 52 with myself, Simon Hampson.
And me, Adam Stanecki.
This week we're talking about dealing with conflict. What happens when you have to deal with conflict in your workplace, Adam?
I don't know. We never have any conflict at all, Simon Hampson.
Well, you know, maybe this topic came up after you came from a particularly violent BJJ sort of session one morning or something.
You know, that's how we end everything. There's no conflict. We just beat each other up. There's no conflict at all. I just like how we haven't even introduced our guest and she's already laughing in the background.
Our guest on this week's episode of Simplify My Small Business is an expert in helping people and organisations deal with change, technique and avoid conflict and all these great things. Her name is Chris Dacos. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if I'm an expert, but I might have something to share this evening. So thanks for the opportunity to participate with you.
You're welcome.
Chris has been a really engaged listener for a long time for Simplify, and I think you've said a few times, Chris, that you've got a lot out of what we've talked about, and through talking with you, I think that there was quite a bit that you could bring to the table on a number of different topics, not just dealing with conflict. And but we thought this would be a good place to start, because I think for a lot of small business owners out there, conflict is a really difficult thing to deal with. They're so busy with running their business day to day. You know, it takes a lot of emotional stress and a lot of it drains a lot of their energy to deal with conflict, I guess. So it's a topic that I think a lot of business owners will find quite close to their hearts.
Yes, and I don't think any business is devoid of it, and nor should they be, really. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It just really is part of being in an organisation.
Totally. I thought the first place we could start tonight is to talk about why conflict happens.
So with the work that I've been doing with lots of organisations, predominantly the conflict seems to surface around difference between perceived threats that individuals may experience around their resources, around their needs, or around their values. So even if both of you think about the last time you were in conflict, either at a professional level or a personal level, one of those three things will come to play, either resources, needs, or values. And so we have perceptions of how the world should be that aren't necessarily going to match with the person on the other side of the table.
Yeah, I remember, I think I've told Simon this before, but many, many years ago, I used to do a traditional Kung Fu style of martial arts, which I'm miles away from now. But we used to have this saying that was up, like one of the, precepts of the school. It was, anticipation is the path to defeat. And the idea that it was applied to self-defense and to fighting, but I always took it to when I was working professionally in large organizations that if I expected an outcome or a behavior from a certain person and I didn't get that always led to conflict. Mm-hmm. And the beautiful thing about it is it turns everything back on you.
Yes.
So a lot of these conflicts occur because of what we expect is going to happen, and it doesn't necessarily become that way, or what we want to happen. Like our desires aren't met or something like that. And then we get really upset about it, and you get that on both ends. And then all of a sudden, it flies wickedly out of control.
Yeah, at an intellectual level, we can all appreciate that we are different, and we understand that until we both want something that's different, and then this irrational animal seems to surface, I think, and our expectations become a little bit thwarted and misguided.
I guess you both identified two different types of conflict that I've seen in the past there, which, Adam, you were talking about someone's preconceived assumptions being the cause of the conflict. And Chris, you were talking about someone's resources being a source of conflict, like almost like the prison meal where someone's sort of protecting their meal with their arm, and
it's not just resources too. It could be our values are in conflict too, or our needs are in conflict. So we perceive that to be that experience, and so once that interaction actually occurs, that's when the conflict occurs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I value is different to what you value. We come to the table, there's conflict. What I need and what you need is different. What we both want, resources-wide, is different. And so the end result will actually result in a conflict. And it's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing at all. I think what organisations really need to do is to be able to have the capacity to manage conflict. We get too busy focused on what needs to be done rather than how we're going to work together, so we don't spend a lot of time talking about how we manage conflict when it occurs.
So would it be safe to say that we could look at conflict as a step in a process of decision-making or getting to a better place, or a step in change or something like that?
Absolutely. And I think I shared with you both before this broadcast started, At a TEDx conference I was at the other day, there was a woman who spoke by the name of Margaret Heffernan, and she's been a CEO of a number of large organisations. She talked about this wonderful thing called that we shouldn't shy away from conflict, that we shouldn't actually work in organisations where there are echo chambers, because it discourages thinking. So when people can actually disagree constructively, it can lead to progress and to thinking. But what we tend to do is keep our ideas to ourselves or shy away from articulating what our concern might be or what we disagree with for fear of some reprisals. So she talked about, enhancing relationships by allowing good disagreement to occur. It was just, it was really inspirational. It kind of made me think, well, it makes sense, because we often get into a group think in organisations. People are afraid to actually speak their mind for fear of the repercussions, or it might upset the status quo. So we won't say, let's put mirrors in the gym, because we don't put mirrors in the gym.
No, we don't. Not this gym.
Yes, you see.
I wonder if that's a bit of a reaction to the whole kind of push for the team methodology in corporations and organisations. That kind of, hey, we're all part of a team, guys, and there's a perception that you have to be pushing in the same direction.
Yeah, I lost what you just said then, Simon, but I'm just going to make a comment anyway, respective of that. When I do a lot of work with teams, what I often talk to them about is teams get busy with the business of what it is they need to produce and don't spend time talking about, well, how are we going to work together? So that process stuff, which is really important too. And how often do you as a team actually make a decision about your decision-making processes, for example, too? So we often don't have those conversations until we need to make a very difficult decision. And when those emotions are heated, it's hard to decide on a process then. So I talk about, well, let's talk about how we're going to make decisions. What will be our ground rules for working together? And I think when a lot of that's done, we can kind of dissipate the level of conflict that may occur. Sometimes the actual structural conditions within an organisation can precipitate conflict, like the way, as we've just talked about, decision-making processes, how resources are allocated, how people talk to each other or don't talk to each other. So they can often add to things, let alone that the conflict at the personal level, so the intrapersonal stuff. So I'm being asked to do something by this organisation that goes against my grain, or the conflict I might have with another individual, interpersonal. And today I worked with some support staff. They talked about their interpersonal conflict with the teachers that they have to support sometimes because they don't talk about their issues. So there's an elephant in the room. We can smell it, but no one wants to talk about it.
Well, that brings a really interesting topic to the table, isn't it? About people's personal life outside work causing conflicts, or their values and their sort of assumptions from outside of work that they bring into work, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. And I don't want to dismiss or minimise or undervalue any of your personal values, but if we're going to work together in an organisation, I think our organisation needs to decide on some fundamental core values that'll underpin the way we work together, so that we'll be on the same page, at least when we deliver the work. So you can still have your personal values, but when we come together, what will be the guiding principles for our practice? So that a lot of work that I do in schools is around helping schools certainly develop those guiding principles, but then ensuring that they are functional and operational. So if they decide on something like respect, we live it. We just don't read it on the wall, for example.
Absolutely. Simon and I have been, a few episodes ago, Simon, we talked about filtering vision and mission and all that down from the top. And so, Chris, when you talk to organisations about this stuff, are you very much about this stuff has to be determined by whoever's at the top? And
Absolutely. Yeah, and so we can minimise conflict if we've ensured that people are all on the same page about where we're going. Are we all consistent in the direction that we're heading towards, so that when somebody engages in a practice or participates in an action that is contrary to our goal, I can bring you back. I can give you feedback that says, how is what you're doing consistent with our vision? How is it consistent with the goals that we're trying to achieve? I can depersonalise that feedback then. But yes, the vision, the mission is very important. And if an organisation hasn't developed those kind of core values about how we're going to work together to minimise conflict, then there'll be words in the vision that I can pull out that'll say, well, this is where this organisation says it's going and says how it's going to work. So if you behave contrary to that, the feedback is depersonalised then, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would help so much because you remove that emotion. Well, you don't remove the emotional response, but you get to manage the emotional response to whatever has occurred.
Yeah.
This is one thing that, as you would know this, Chris, because you can the gym where you train. Because our listeners probably don't know this, but Chris trains at the gym. It's very open. Like the community is very open, and everyone sees everything. So most of our business practices are actually more obvious to our members than we probably want, which is just a consequence of the way we've decided to run the place. But you can. There was a point to this, Chris. There was a point to this. You can you can see that there are levels of conflict amongst staff, from staff to members, between members. It's a really interesting dynamic within the gym where there's all these little like miniature storms of conflict between people. Like everyone's part of a community, but they're part of their own little world, and there's these small little cliques, and everyone's going across this conflict, going left and right and centre. It all still happens, and it works together. And the reason it works is everyone knows what the ground rules are to be in that community.
Yeah.
Like what's an acceptable kind of behaviour? Like it's okay to openly bitch and moan as long as you can accept the response that you get. It's okay to not like what's going on as long as, like there's a level of honesty about what's being said and that you're not just being an ass. I remember way back when I was working in IT that all this kind of stuff would happen similarly, like across the bigger floors. Like we'd have floors and floors of programmers and business analysts and all this kind of stuff. And everyone would be in their little cliques because there's like their little 4-person work areas. And they would have a conflict with this group, and the testers wouldn't like these people, and these people wouldn't like those people.
Yeah, that's your intergroup conflict, beautifully illustrated. Yeah.
But in that organisation, there were no ground rules. Like everyone just could bitch and moan the whole time, and nothing ever goes. So it got very negative. There was like a spiral of negativity.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you talk about the almost microcosms that are occurring within CrossFit at our gym, because I don't see it. And maybe it's because I'm very clear of what the ground rules are and what the expectations are. Because even when, and I'll just share this with our listeners, you gave me a stern talking to on Saturday about my preparation for an exercise I was about to do.
Oh, yes, I did. It's all for your own good, Chris.
No, but you see, I took that in the spirit of that was the ethos of that gym. So I was very clear about that and took that on board, because even though it was not overtly expressed when I signed up, it became part of the hidden rules of the organisation, and I quickly learned those. So I was quite surprised that you came back to me later and checked that I was okay, because I didn't even give it a second thought. I thought that's why I signed up here, to be corrected sternly when I needed it.
Don't do it again.
But most gyms you wouldn't even have that correction. It's not even about the levels of sternness. It's that.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. At your Globo gym with the mirrors in there, no one will be correcting you. You just do your back and that's it. Or you do. It's
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's quite. And I guess the other thing too is, it's even if that had not been kind of articulated as a practice with CrossFit in Rose Street, I think it's up to individuals to actually articulate when they are uncomfortable with what's being expressed. So you could have done that, and I could have gone away and been very upset about it, just withdrawn from that conflict, which is an option I can use. So in conflict, I've got some choices. I can withdraw from it. I can suppress it and pretend it's not a problem. I can plot to get you back next time so that I win because you won that round, and maybe I want to win the next one. So, but there are choices that individuals make in conflict, and very often, a lot of organisations, there is this suppression or this passive-aggressive approach to it, and it simmers. People just assume others will know how they're feeling or what it is that they want, and it won't happen.
Am I Sorry, didn't mean to cut in, but I'm going to continue anyway, because that's what I do, Simon, and you need to get used to it, Chris. I'm just going to talk over. Am I oversimplifying by stating that at the core, it's all about communication?
Critically. Absolutely critically. I often say to people that I work with that we teach people how to treat us. So if you think about a difficulty that you're experiencing with an individual, you need to be thoughtful about, well, what is it that I might be doing or more often not doing that's encouraging this person to treat me in this way. And so unless I actually let them know what it is that's a problem, things aren't going to change. So feedback is a critical part of communication. Part of communication.
Do you know, we've talked about this a couple of times on the show, that I am now a certified practicing hypnotherapist, but part of the whole training stack in learning about this was that people are either at cause or effect. And people need to be at cause in order to get an effect from hypnotherapy. They need to take ownership of whatever actions they're trying to solve through hypnotherapy. So if they're a smoker, they need to be at the point of cause where they're ready to give up smoking.
Yes.
And it's the same thing here. I think people need to say, okay, I'm the cause of this communication breakdown. Something that I've done or not done has caused it. So how can I fix it,
Yes, but there's a reluctance of individuals to actually articulate what might be the problem because there are concerns about repercussions. And I often state that I can't take responsibility, and nor should you, Adam, in the case of what happened in the gym on Saturday, take responsibility for how I receive the feedback that you give me. That's not up to you, because then you'll be busy worrying about the hundreds of other members that you have in the gym. You have a responsibility when in that situation to ensure that you give the feedback in a way that is honest, respectful, and in the spirit of, correcting my technique. Now, how I choose to receive that, that's my baby in a sense. But often we don't give that feedback because you'll get upset or you won't like me or it'll damage our relationship. But I would then question how functioning that relationship is if the actual issue isn't addressed anyway. I don't know how we got there. But yes, communication, feedback, honesty, but respectful honesty, I think, and professional honesty, I think, is different too.
So one of the notes we had in talking about this topic was
let's go back to those.
levels of conflict.
Yes.
Comfort zone. Get back into the comfort zone now.
Oh, no. There was another TEDx speaker that talked about measuring our comfort zone and stepping out of it. I thought he was brilliant too. Levels of conflict. Yeah, there are levels of conflict we can start with. And it was interesting. I was speaking to a teacher today who had said to me, there's something not right between myself and this other teacher, and I just don't know what it is. So there's this level of discomfort. You feel uncomfortable about a situation, but you're just not quite sure why. And perhaps that might have happened on Saturday between us. You might have thought, this little bit of discomfort, I'm not sure. Is she taking it the wrong way? If that's not dealt with, we lose. It may grow to become an actual incident where something minor occurs.
Well, that was my. I mean, I've got a history of putting my foot in my mouth. And,
yes, but...
And sometimes the filter between my brain and my mouth doesn't work very well. So what I needed to make sure when I approached you, because I was quite sure that I didn't say... let me rephrase. I was quite sure that you didn't take anything incorrectly. Yeah. What I really wanted to make sure was that I had articulated myself in the correct fashion, because we'd never had that interaction before. So I wanted to make sure that, like, my approach in that case, whilst it was abrupt and it was straight down the line and I didn't sugarcoat anything, was an acceptable thing to you. Because if it wasn't, I might not find that out from you. I might find it out in some roundabout way, and then I can't, for want of a better term, fix the problem. So I always like just to make sure that's okay. Well, and sometimes we were in a group as well. So sometimes if I'm talking to you and you and I have got a relationship where we can you and I can handle this kind of very straight down the line, pared back. But the people behind you go, he was rude. Yes. And then you've got a different issue to deal with because they think you were being rude. Adam was being rude to Chris. I don't want to train here anymore because he's a rude coach.
The group dynamic.
But so that was my reason for asking you about that quietly, just to, I respect your opinion. I want to know if anything went on here.
Yeah, but what you did was perhaps prevented a situation of discomfort moving to the next level, which is either an incident, a misunderstanding, or growing to tension. And if we don't deal with it, it escalates to a crisis level. And I will often talk about we need to deal with conflict because it becomes like if you hang on to a rubber band and something happens between you and I, if we don't deal with it, we get a little bit of stretch in that rubber band, and then something else happens, we get more stretch in that rubber band, then something else happens, and then something minor could happen, something very minor, like we both reach for the last green tea bag in the gym for perhaps.
Snap.
Yes, and everybody else is quite surprised that you have overreacted about me getting the last tea bag. but it hasn't been the tea bag. It's been all that's been building up to that.
Who sank the boat?
It's really important to be able to deal with things there and then. And I was really surprised that this teacher was saying, she was asking my advice today around what should she do. She feels that there is something going on with this other person. She's just not sure what it is, can't name it, and not sure what's happened. And I said to her, ask her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell her.
People
talk
are
about
so scared that they're going to say the wrong thing.
Do you think conflict occurs over people's judgments, Chris?
Absolutely. Which your judgment's based on your perception.
Yeah.
So this is how you see the world. So unless I actually express a contrary view or, argue against that, that's really my choice in a sense, whether I want to deal with that or not, or I could just let you go and go, well, that's your view. That's how you see the world, or that's how you see teachers. It's inevitable. It's inevitable in our personal relationships. It's inevitable in our professional relationships. So it's about how do we manage conflict effectively. And I think that's what a lot of organisations don't have the skills in. There's a lot of goodwill, but I don't think they actually have the skills to manage it effectively.
So when we're looking at personal relationships and maybe small business relationships, not the larger corporate kind of relationship where maybe a system can be put in place, what kind of things should we be looking at? Just the simple bits that we can look at when we want to respond to a conflict. That like the feel you were just saying, that feeling. I have a feeling that something's happening.
Yeah,
because we all get this. I mean, apart from the obvious, sit down, let's have a cup of tea and have a chat because something doesn't feel right here. Well, what other steps can we take in responding to conflict, in managing conflict, without having to put a huge system in place and then manage that?
Well, I think there needs to be some discussion or conversation around the value of it, in a sense, so that we can see there's merit in an opportunity for us to present our opposing views and perhaps come up with something completely different and come up with something completely new. So I think it needs to be firstly recognised as an inevitable part of a small business or a relationship, and then just put some parameters in place while things are working well around, well, when we experience it, how are we going to manage it? How are the coaches at CrossFit going to manage conflict when it occurs? Because when you're in conflict, that decision is hard
to the death.
That decision is hard to make at that point then. And we don't do that. We don't talk about our processes. We talk about what needs to be done rather than, again, how we're going to work together. So I think it'll be very individual for each small business because they'll have their own peculiarities. So what will you do? What will we do when we have conflict? How will we manage this? What will be some strategies that will work for us? We bring things to the table. Will we debate them? What will be our decision-making process, really? Organisations don't even do that. Small businesses don't do that.
No, it's not something that you're even taught to think about. Like even small business education doesn't talk about this kind of stuff at all.
No.
Ever.
No.
Ever.
No, and then we have to make a decision, and then it hits the fan because we're not happy. But if we have a process and we've gone, okay, if we at CrossFit ever need to make a decision, we're going to go with majority rule. Are we all happy with that? Yeah, all happy with that.
Yeah.
And then the first time you have to make a decision about mirrors or no mirrors, and the majority wins, you see, the person who voted for mirrors is unhappy, but they're less unhappy because at least they've been part of a process.
Yeah, a process has been followed.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that.
Yeah. So I think we just need to decide how we're going to do it when it happens, and we talk about that when things are working well.
Yeah. I always, anytime I do any business coaching with anyone or just casual mentoring of people who want to start businesses, I'm like, you need to plan for the shit days. Like,
absolutely,
are just fighting over the most inane bullshit in your business because it's not all rosy. Like people who are like, I'm going to go into business with this guy because we're really good friends. I'm like, well, that's really nice, but at some point, your friendship is not going to cut it in the business sphere of existence, and you are going to lock horns. And you need to number one, you need to know this is going to happen, and number two, you need to agree ahead of time on how you're going to deal with that stuff.
Yes, and especially so for two individuals who are friends.
Absolutely.
Especially so for that. Absolutely. Yes, so I think that's really good advice to give a business to anticipate the troughs in your business development.
The other thing, the other part of this, I think, is to focus on the things that actually need to be focused on. Like your example before about you both going for the last green tea bag in the gym. If the discussion was about the fact that it was the last green tea bag, chances are you're focusing on the wrong thing.
Absolutely.
So,
but what we haven't done, Simon, is talked about the thing that was the real issue when it was an issue.
Yeah.
I talk about, we need to dealing with issues that are problematic is like drinking champagne. We need to drink champagne when it bubbles, okay?
Yeah.
Can't drink it when it's flat, although one of the teachers in my group today said she'd have it flat too. So, but it is about dealing with issues as they're bubbling rather than letting them accumulate.
Festering out of control.
Yes, and just assuming.
It's out of hand. And the most ridiculous little things, it's like mountains out of molehills, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes when we go to resolve problems and conflict, we base our resolution on the position a person may have rather than, and this is where I think skills are really important, being able to manage conflict. So if Simon and I, for example, both wanted the orange, Simon wants it, I want it, Simon wants it, I want it, Adam, getting frustrated with this, will do what?
I'll eat it. I'm taking the orange myself.
Or
stops the problem. This is what the dad would do.
Or
you cut it in half.
Yes. Our natural inclination in conflict is to compromise and cut it in half. But it's not an effective way of dealing with conflict because we've tried to manage this problem by addressing the position we've both taken, which is I want the orange and Simon wants the orange. Now, if you were skilled in conflict resolution, you'd say, tell me a little bit about why you want that orange, Simon. And Simon would say, well, I think I'm coming down with a cold. Let him speak. He wants it because he's coming down with a cold and he wants the juice. And so then you say to me, Chris, well, why do you want it? And I say, well, I'm coming off the 30-day paleo and I really want to make an orange and poppy seed cake and I want to grate that rind. Now, because we have looked at what the interests are, what the wants and needs of the individual are behind the conflict, I have a better capacity to manage this because to cut it in half is not the solution. Because what might the solution clearly be?
You get the skin and I get the pulp.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Beautiful.
It's quite wonderful.
Yeah. So compromise is not a solution. Okay. So we need to step into people's worlds about why do they want what they want? Why do they really need this? Because then both of us can generate, both Simon and I can generate possible solutions in terms of needs. But again, it's a skill. It's a skill.
Chris, have you read this book?
A lot of small business individuals don't have. Sorry?
Have you read this?
I can't see it.
Getting to yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I've started reading this book, and it talks about three methods of negotiation, right? Hard, soft, and principled. And principled sounds like exactly what you're talking about at the moment.
Yes.
You're trying, like soft being, let's accommodate each other and let's be friends and all this. Hard being screw you, no screw you, you're my enemy, I'm not going to give an inch. And principle being let's work out a way that everyone can benefit out of this and find out what's really at the core of everything. Yeah. And I started reading and I'm like, it's so bloody obvious.
Well, it's not
but it's not. Do you know what I mean? No. You start reading and you're like, why would anyone do it any other way? But it's not. It's not your default behaviour. It's just that it makes perfect sense when someone reads it to you or when you read it from a book.
And emotions get involved too.
Absolutely. Emotions
Ego.
Yes. And a need to win gets involved as well. So that principle and that process and a win-win approach to conflict, first of all, you and I have to have a paradigm shift and we have to move from win-lose to win-win.
Yes.
So how many of us would be willing to come to a table when we're in conflict with someone and go, okay, at the end of this, we're both going to win. We're both going to win when we go through this process and this procedure. And I think that's kind of fundamental in a interest-based approach to dealing with conflict.
Chris, what is the C management procedure?
The C management procedure. Well, if you two boys were in conflict and I was going to facilitate a conversation around your conflict, I would first of all explain the process and say this was an opportunity for you to be involved in a conversation where you would have your needs discussed and heard, and then you would both look at possible solutions and you would decide them, but I would need you first to agree to be part of a process where hopefully you would both win. So I'd need to get an agreement that you would be willing to do that. So you're nodding away and going, yes. And so that I might then go, well, tell me what the problem is. Once we've set the scene, I talk about the problem in terms of what do you need, Simon? In relation to this conflict with Adam, what is it that you really need? Then we talk about Adam's needs. So what is it in relation to, not from his position, and his position may have been to have the roller door open in the gym and you want it shut. And Adam wants it open and you want it shut. And so we talk about why you want it shut, and you say, man, my arthritis in my neck has been really a pain today, and the breeze is smacking it.
It's my hay fever.
Okay, let it be your hay fever. And Adam goes, no, it needs to be open. People get to see what's going on. We need some fresh air in the place. Really important. So somebody with all good intentions does something to assist you both, and they roll a door down halfway. But once we can be clear about, what the problem is and based on your needs, we can then say, okay, what might be some possible solutions? You want it shut because of your hay fever. You want it open because of the opportunity for others to see what's happening in the gym, and you want some fresh air. What could be some possible solutions? So I, as the facilitator, then would give you an opportunity to brainstorm. And then from those, you two would choose something that would work for both of you. And even with that simple example, could you think of something that might work for both of you? You want it open, Adam, and you want it closed, Simon, because the hay fever is getting to you, and you have been positioned right near the opening of that garage door. What might be a possible solution that would satisfy you both?
Well, we'd need to reposition me
Yes.
to the back of the gym, wouldn't we?
But yes.
Or put him in an office or a cardboard box.
But do you see, though, that the process is we set the scene, we'd be willing to participate in the process. We look at the problem in terms of needs, not solutions. We generate those possible solutions and then look at evaluating them that'll meet both of your needs.
And it's getting the parties to take ownership of the solution that you come up with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're removing this position that everyone's taking, so we're not arguing from a position, we're arguing from needs more than position. Interest, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Which again makes perfect sense, but isn't obvious.
No, yes. So it's just a question around, why do you want that? Why do you want that?
That's a really tough question for people to answer sometimes.
Oh.
People just get like they will take a stance on something. So this is my position, but maybe haven't really thought why they've actually taken that stance, and start arguing against people who have the opposite stance or the opposite belief or whatever it may be. But they've never really sat down and thought about why they've taken that stance. And it might have been, well, I follow this football team because my dad follows this football team. I believe in this because this is what I was taught as a child, or this is what my colleagues at school, my friends at school did. And never really, anyway, I'm getting deep and meaningful right now. Because I find that really interesting with stuff like, I find that stuff really interesting with, the big discussions you can get into about religion and politics and all that kind of crazy stuff where everyone's always arguing from a position rather than what they're trying to achieve, or so you're arguing conservative politics and non-conservative politics and liberal politics, all this kind of stuff, but it's not really an argument about what everyone's trying to achieve, like a better world, for instance. They're just like, you can't do that because I don't believe you should do that. You're never going to get anywhere. You see this all the time in political debates.
Bar one thing.
What's that?
One thing. Manchester United are the best soccer team in the world.
We're not allowed to talk about Manchester United because Van Persie's now playing for them, and no one from Arsenal should ever go to Man United.
Okay, see, I don't know what you boys are talking about now, so we need to come back to a shared space.
I'm going to have to bring back the rule that fighting solves everything, Simon.
Anytime, any place, young man.
All conflicts go into physical, violent confrontation. No, that's just not going to work. Chris is going to hang up. She's hung up. She's gone.
No.
I can't teach these boys anything.
No, I was just rereading what Margaret Heffernan had said, and she said, as I said at the beginning, we should not work in echo chambers, that great research teams, relationships and business allow people to deeply disagree. And I thought, that's just wonderful. We don't feel safe to be able to do that. There's a good disagreement is actually central to progress and to thinking. Because if I disagree with you competently, what I will also do is go, wow, I never thought of it like that. I'd never considered that as a perspective, because I have the capacity to be open to what it is that you're proposing.
It strikes me that no one really ever wants to be that disagreeable person, or if we have an opinion on something, we're automatically called opinionated rather than maybe thoughtful or thinking or thorough. I remember. I'm sure I didn't word myself very well when I was a lot younger. Not that I actually word myself very well now, but when I was in my early to mid 20s, I was retrenched from an IT job. But I was always the guy who was playing devil's advocate, saying, "There's a better way of doing this." I was probably not saying it as politely as that. And when they did the clean out, they got rid of everyone that shook the boat. You know, like if you're rocking the boat a little bit, you're out of here. So all the yes men and women stayed, and all the people that had an opinion that wasn't quite the company line, boom, out the door.
Well, I wonder how successful that company is right now and how much they've actually grown. Okay, thanks.
I was going to say, are they still around now?
Yeah.
I know, shut down. Shut down.
Yes, they didn't allow for good disagreement, and thus they thwarted its progress.
Ooh, thwart. Beautiful use of the word thwart.
I think that's a really good place to finish on this week's episode.
Oh, we could talk forever, couldn't we, really?
One last thought I want to leave in everyone's mind is that is time pressure taking away your ability to deal with conflict and to maybe unpack all of the sort of things that are going on? Potentially time has a part to play here too.
I think that's a crutch we can hang on, or we can decide what's important and how we want to invest the time that we do have. So if a relationship is important, either professionally or personally, then I make time to do something about that.
Totally agree. And on a personal level, I think you can make that choice. But I think in a lot of organisations, you see it with things like emails nowadays. You know, someone wants an answer really, really quickly. And I think the same thing can happen with negotiating conflict and negotiating the kind of terms around projects too. It can be rushed a bit, you know.
Yes, and look, teachers will often say to me when I talk about the need to have some of those restorative conversations with young people once we've exited them from classrooms, that those conversations can take an awfully long time. And I go, yes, but you spend an awful amount of time chastising and disciplining that kid and sending them out. So it may be worth a 15-minute conversation to restore what was functioning between the two of you at one point. So it's choice. I still believe it's choice. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I see it with Kalen. My son is he gets very very excited in the moment. So often you'll have to say time out or quite firmly say stop, and then 5-10 minutes later when things have calmed down, you can have that conversation.
Yes.
It's a very important part of the whole piece, I think.
Yes.
Now Adam chose a great quote for this week.
Oh, share. Love quotes.
I just love the title of the book that this is from. It's from The Master of Stupidity by Toba Beta or Toba Beta. I'm not quite sure about the pronunciation. Provocation is on the opposite side, on the opposite lane of resolution. I'll say that again. Provocation is on the opposite lane of resolution. I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, nice.
Really cool.
It's very true.
So stop poking me, Simon. Stop it.
Chris Dacos, thank you so much for joining us on this week's
Thank you,
Simplify My
Adam
Small
and
Business.
Simon. I've had a
Please come back
evening.
again soon, Chris.
Okay, thanks.
For all of you out there, if you want to check out more Simplify My Small Business, go to www.simplifymysmallbusiness.com or facebook.com/SMSB2011. We have an episode there called Creating a Compelling Company Culture that I think is pretty darn relevant to what we've talked about this week, and lots of other great resources there. Give us a like on Facebook, maybe put us a review on iTunes, recommend us to 5 of your best friends, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm Simon Hampson.
I'm Adam Stanecki.
We'll see you again soon. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.